Friends, I would like to say a few words of welcome to all of you, whether you are here in person at the Liberal Jewish Synagogue or online, participating on Zoom or on various social media channels. 3 years we didn't have a gathering for the Liberal Judaism. And this is the first day of celebration after such a long break. And let's just welcome each other and say welcome to a person next to you and introduce yourself and say a few words. If you're on Zoom or participating online, please write a few messages on chat. Write where you're from, where you are joining us from. And I would like to officially open the Day of Celebration 2022. And for the opening words, I would like to invite Rabbi Dr. Andrew Goldstein, President of the Liberal Judaism.
He got more applause than I did, I know. That feels better. So, 120 years, and now I find myself looking around, counted amongst the really ancients. Not 120 years, but half the figure, because I reckon it's at least 60 years since I got involved in Liberal Judaism. 120 years, however, Liberal Judaism has survived many eras and situations. In 1902, when we were founded, a country still in mourning the death of the longest-serving monarch, Queen Victoria, well until her granddaughter is going to beat her. Yet I think it was then a country filled with wonder to what a new king would bring and what a new century would hold out. There was a sense of excitement, I think. There were a feeling of new freedom, of looking forward. Open minds that led so many to drift away from religion. Intellectual challenges. A rapidly growing economy based on workers working long hours, still for little money, and little free time for synagogue or church. 1902, still Jewish immigrants and refugees were allowed in. Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, and other East European countries, Yiddish-speaking poor, and a small but well-established Jewish upper middle class, as Chaim Berman called them, the cousinhood. I can imagine the first committee meetings of the Jewish Religious Union in grand Bloomsbury houses, half-time refreshments served by the butler. I do remember, by the way, that the late Rosita Rosenberg told the story of when the Reading community was founded. It was in the home of the Hon. Peter Samuel. And actually, the Kiddush was served by a butler on a silver tray. Those were the days. And I have to say that my only meeting with Lily Montague in her famous home, the Red Lodge, was when I came down to be interviewed to join the Lirbet College. Came all the way from Birmingham and back in one, and only got a thin arrowroot biscuit and weak tea. Not good for a hungry lad from Birmingham, but that was the standard in those days. And so Liberal Judaism was born to a divided Jewish population, dignified services in posh London hotel, yet soon it appears more people attending East End services in hired halls until the toffs closed them down. After all, they were paying for all the services. The ideas of liberal Judaism attracting West End upper class and East End workers. But liberal Judaism, I reckon, mostly afterwards, had a middle class patina. Intellectually liberal and into social action in a paternalistic way, confidence that the Messianic age, as the Enlightenment had taught, was well attainable. And it was believed that liberal Judaism would lead the way, bimheira, in their days. But then in 1914, the First World War, and soon the confidence was dented. Reform Judaism may have been born in Germany, and up to 1914 its leadership was there, but now Germany and England were on opposite sides. And in a way, liberal Judaism never got close to its German roots, unlike the Reform movement here. But fortunately, over a half-century, progressive Judaism had flourished in the opposite direction in America. And it was from America that our inspiration came. And boy, we sure found inspiration and energy in the form and the energy and the teachings of Rabbi Dr. Israel Mattock, who established our ethos as a social justice organization. And with Lily Montague led to our expansion, bringing the gospel of liberal Judaism to far-flung places like Birmingham and Dublin and South London. But soon there were worrying times, depression after the First World War, and a growing threat of fascism in Spain and then Germany. There's research to be done, I suddenly realized, a book to be written on liberal Judaism during the Second World War and the Holocaust. What was our reaction as a movement and as rabbis? Like so much of Anglo Jewry, I was never made aware during my teens of the enormity of the Shoah, nor the establishment of the State of Israel. Think about our prayer book of that time and our calendar. Neither earth-shattering events were even mentioned in it. But despite a post-war economic depression, and with a new queen, long may she reign, we flourished. Another new age of growing optimism and a simpler life with social life centered on the synagogue. Those were the days of youth clubs, of women's societies, of jumble sales, of dinner dances, of drama groups. Some of you may remember them. Yes, and even the beginnings of creativity in liturgy. New and energetic rabbis, Rainer, Hooker, Richard, Brichto, Helner, Jacobi, and so on. And all the others I missed out, like Neuberger, Goldberg, all of them adding so much to the color of liberal Judaism. Gates of prayer and conferences by the seaside. In those days, large religion schools, they didn't call them cheders in those days, meetings for sports days and project days, and yachtav for confirmees, morphing into KTs, and key to my world, Kadima Summer School. Israel tours and newfound interest in Zionism. And women rabbis taking their rightful places in the movement started by a woman and established by mighty females like Rita Hyman and Rosita Rosenberg. Heady times, I believe. 120 years of ups and downs, but mostly ups, as liberal Judaism reacted well to changing times. And we have adapted and changed, progressing indeed. In liturgy, thee and thou becoming you, Lord, the Eternal One, and the Shekhinah welcomed. Havdalah and Selichot refound, and brave social changes confronted, and we have led Anglo Jewry the way of acceptance of gays and trans, mixed marriages and conversions. We should be very proud of our last half century. We should be very proud of all of our achievements in the last 120 years. But now there are new challenges to be faced in our next 120 years, please God. Again, a world no longer knocking on the door of the Messianic age, a peaceful time. Suddenly, it looks more unsafe than we can believe. Old certainties, alliances crumbling. And Ukraine highlights our new anxiety in security and in economy. Yes, we've been here before, and we'll work our way through it. We will survive. The COVID pandemic could have obliterated our congregations and our synagogues, yet we changed our ways of praying and working. And a number of congregations did not go under as they thought might happen, but have increased their membership and enthusiasm over these past 2 years. But let's be honest, there is a real challenge to religion, to worship, to synagogue attendance, to festival observance, to theistic belief, and the whole concept of community, to moral boundaries and ethical parameters. Challenges posed by 100 TV channels and ways of watching, to fake news and shallow celebrity culture, to positive social media connections, and yet the dangers they also pose. All new things and so much more. Challenges to social care and an aging population, in saving the planet from global warming and suddenly again a Cold War and nuclear anxiety. What will be the response of liberal Judaism? Well, as I said, it has confronted in its 120 years several eras of change and challenge and has become stronger. Has often led the Jewish way, being creative and outward-looking, yet inwardly inclusive. The challenge now starts with this day of celebration, and let us renew our enthusiasm and increase our commitment. Claude Montefiore made just the same charge during his address at the first service of our movement 120 years ago. He said, "A religion lives in and by the persons who profess it. They can make it better, they can make it worse. It is then for us to make Judaism better by the fervor of our adherence and by the value of our lives." Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So much to think about there, and what a challenge for us. And so I want to just begin by welcoming you all to today's day of celebration. Our first, as Rabbi Igor said, our first hybrid event in this way. And it represents everything that we have come to be known for at Liberal Judaism. A fantastic relationship with our communities, collaborative working together, a multiplicity of voices, and an incredible program delivered to wherever people find themselves. Thank you to the LJS, who are physically hosting us, and every single one of our communities who are and have hosted us in their own way. We have phenomenal chairs in Rabbi Igor, who's off doing tech already, and Suzanne Saal, representing that amazing rabbinic and lay partnership of which we are so proud. And a committee which represents our communities in their diversity. Thank you to all of them for their tireless work and commitment. As you will have seen, the theme of this year's conference is where liberal and Judaism meet. And as I hope you've seen from the exciting program, it's designed to look at what it means to be a liberal Jew in 2022, focusing on a celebration, a real celebration, of our constant quest to challenge and develop both our liberalism and our Judaism. Liberal Judaism has often played an essential, sometimes even leading role in shaping religious and social reform in its 120-year history. And many of us are now thinking about our next steps of our liberal Judaism story. And so today is about exploring that past and beginning to think about the future. And for all of those of you who've got your diaries handy, remember that the day of celebration is a taster for what is to come at Biennial, where we'll begin to look at liberal Judaism and how we take those next steps forward. So put it in your diary. You heard it here first. The 28th and 30th of April 2023, Biennial. I can see Ruth leading from the front always as our chair of liberal Judaism, putting that in her diary right now. Come and join us. The other day I was thinking about, as I always am, day of celebration, and I was stood in my kitchen preparing dinner for my children as they sat together at the table discussing the day that had passed. The spoon filled with peas paused mid-air. I found myself caught up in their conversation. My 3 children, 13, 11, 9, were discussing identities and politics, their place in the world, and of course, TikTok. My 3 kids are without question Bimmer babies. They grew up on the Bimmer in the heart of the liberal Jewish community. But they are also children who are surrounded by a non-Jewish world. For 2 of them, they are the only Jewish kids in their school, and for the other one of very few. However, their values, their tolerance for the other, their ability to elicit meaning from the world is all liberal Judaism and LJY Netzer. What's more, the effect of this spreads to their friends and into the world at large. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God did not make the light, but spoke. We know today, perhaps more than ever, that language creates, it builds worlds. Liberal Judaism committed itself to creating a world in the space where liberal and Judaism meet. We committed to collaborating between our communities and collaborating between the cross-communal sectors of the Jewish world and between other faiths and beyond. We committed to ensuring that liberal Judaism met the needs of those on the margins, but we also committed to ensuring that we are not seen as a marginal part of Judaism, but that we held a central place in the beautiful spectrum of what it means to be Jewish. We committed to there not being only one voice of liberal Judaism, but a multiplicity of voices. And we committed to ensuring that we led in how to disagree well. And we committed to being present, to representing, to showing that being authentically part of the Jewish community comes in different forms. And we have been there. At Trafalgar Square, lighting the candles for Hanukkah, in the campaign for dignity and dying led by our very own Rabbi Danny Rich, at Yorkshire Cricket Club, at the Commonwealth Service, round the table with the government, and in many other places. That creative fulcrum where liberal and Judaism meet needs to be nurtured. We have such big dreams of what is possible. And if the last 2 years are anything to go by, then we can, together, bring them to fruition. What is your story? Why does liberal Judaism matter to you? It matters to me because it built my world and gave me a home for my Jewish story. It matters to me because it is forming the next generation of confident liberal Jews who understand the world through the lens of their own Jewish identity and, what's more, are creating tolerance, understanding, and new tunes. But we are not the end of the story or the only story. And because of that, we need you. Please tell your story. Not only so that we can raise money, and that, as you all know, is incredibly important. Money to support incredible future projects that will ensure growth and development and support for a whole new generation of liberal Jews. But also so others hear your voice and know they too can be part of bringing Judaism home. So at some point today, go outside, find Nicole or Gershon sitting at the table outside, and join us in becoming an ambassador for liberal Judaism and helping us grow and tell more Jewish stories. Enjoy today. Thank you. And back to our chair, Edith.
So, speaking about children who are on TikTok, first of all, you can see the Wi-Fi network and passwords on the bottom of the screen. Please connect your phones to the Wi-Fi and go to that link, either now or later today. This is where you will vote for the best poem, the best artwork, and the best photograph of the Day of Celebration 2022. You will see the QR code and the link later all over the building as well. So just go to the website and you will see all the submissions of poems, photographs, and artworks. And the decision will purely be made by us, by participants of the biennial. And as Rabbi Charlie Baginski already said, we are a hybrid event, which means that we have people now participating online. Some are participating on Zoom, but some are on YouTube and Facebook. And those of you on Zoom, can you please wave? Because we can see you now, and we wave at you back. Excellent. And those also would like to welcome all of you who are either new to liberal Judaism or who are an experienced liberal Jew, because this day is exactly for you. I'm going to say a few words of logistics about the day. First of all, if you need a quiet space, then you can always find it either upstairs in the foyer or in the library downstairs. If you would like coffee, there is an unlimited amount of coffee downstairs in the Montefiore Hall, if you so all toilets downstairs are gendered, upstairs toilets are gender neutral. We prepared the program having all of you in mind. So we have two youth programs running at the same time, but for all of you, we have 7 distinct and 7 tracks. And this will be your book for today. The book is here. You can find your schedule for all the sessions and where to find them. Most of the sessions happen upstairs in the rooms upstairs. But if you open page where is the first session? Help me. Page 10. Yeah, page 10. This is where you find the first session. And this is what sessions we have today. So here in the sanctuary, the session, the accidental activist, then inclusion in action upstairs in Matuk room. Can we have too many converts in room number 5? Liberal arts when building community online isn't just enough. In the assembly hall, also upstairs. The session which will be only online later on the 26th of May, but it is also part of the Day of Celebration, will be This is Not the Way Liberal Religious Zionism. And this will not happen today, but later on the 26th of May. The Composing Jewish Music will happen in room number 7 upstairs. And the conversation about Kabbalah, with Dr. Honey Smith will happen in Art Room upstairs. So please choose, and on behalf of the organizing committee, I can only apologize for having such a difficult choice for you to make, which session to go. And please choose your session. The session begins in 5 minutes.
I'm good. Hi. This is Rabbi Danny Rich. It's working. All right. Hello, everybody. Come gather round. Don't be shy. Let's all come a little bit closer. Or escape. That's fine as well. No, you're fine. You're all right. Was it something I said? This is Jamie Klingler. No, don't worry. Don't worry. You're okay. Where are you after? I have that effect on people. It happens. Hello, everybody. I'm Rabbi Anna, but you are not here to see me. That's understandable. It is my great honor to introduce Jamie Klingler. Jamie is a writer, an activist, a keynote speaker, a book reviewer, a pundit on women's safety, and she also is the co-founder of Reclaim These Streets. This year, I hope this isn't a spoiler, but this year, a year after they organized and had to cancel the Sarah Everard Vigil, Jamie, together with Anna Burley, Jessica Lee, and Henna Shah, won a groundbreaking case where 2 judges ruled that the Met Police had breached the rights of the organizers of the vigil, and in that decision that led to the vigil being cancelled. Without further ado, I welcome Jamie, the accidental activist.
Thank you for having me, Anna. Let me just open up notes. So basically, welcome and happy Sunday morning. I was going to give a bit of a trigger warning just because I will talk a little bit about Sarah Everard. But basically, my life was dramatically changed last March. In the lead up to what had happened with Sarah, when Sarah Everard went missing, we had been isolated, we were in lockdown, and I'm a woman who lives alone in Camden. And in those 7 days, I was probably following the case much more closely than I would have in normal times if I was out and about, but was watching the news with that sliver of hope that she would be found. And on the Monday night, I tweeted something to the effect that was pretty innocuous, but that my private WhatsApps were blowing up and that women deserved the right to get home safely and that my heart was breaking for her family. And it got something like 700,000 impressions. And in my past life, I worked at a magazine. I worked at Stylist Magazine, and I was an events organizer. So Tuesday night, Wayne Couzens was arrested, and on Wednesday, tragically, Sarah's remains were found. When I was at Stylist Magazine, the Charlie Hebdo massacre had occurred, and we were in daily conference because we were in a weekly magazine, and kind of everyone in the office just tumbled out of the building, and we went to Trafalgar Square. And that impromptu vigil where I saw basically every other journalist I'd ever met was really healing and was powerful for me. So when Sarah's remains were found, I tweeted that I was going to put on a vigil. I knew how to do the permits, I knew how to contact the police and the council, and just figured I'd take care of that space and give the place for people to come and have a moment of silence and be around other women that were feeling as angry and isolated as I was. Little did I know that my whole world would change quite rapidly after that. I was put in touch with local women who were doing the same thing. So there were some Clapham women that wanted to do a vigil. We joined forces, and Reclaim These Streets was born that night. The reason we were called Reclaim These Streets is police were telling women that the only way we could keep ourselves safe and alive was to stay in our own homes. We were already locked down. And for me, extrapolating that, am I not supposed to get Ocado? Because most of the men are delivery men. Am I not supposed to get a taxi? At what point do I become an agoraphobic? At what point am I not supposed to live the life that I want to live out of fear? Which was not an acceptable thing. So what we were doing was having a vigil for Sarah and for all women that have suffered violence at the hands of men. And by all means, the Lambeth police were saying, obviously there's COVID restrictions, but we will find a way to police this. Lucky for us, they put that in writing. But then on Thursday morning, and this happened so quickly, but on Thursday morning, Scotland Yard came back and said it would be illegal for us to go ahead. And at that point, life kind of turned into a really extended episode of the thick of it. Because really quickly, we were like, are you kidding me? A police officer did this. Like, we know a police officer did this, and they should be handing us tissues. They should be facilitating this. They should be doing anything and everything to support us and support the community. And instead, they were trying to silence us. Many of you will probably know who Adam Wagner is, who has been our barrister, but has also been the conduit for explaining COVID restrictions to the whole of England throughout all of the changing restrictions in terms of guidance and law. So we, not far from like Tinder, we picked up our barrister on Twitter. And so this was Thursday at 1:30 in the afternoon. Scotland Yard said no. Thursday night, we had put up a fundraiser for crowd justice. We needed to raise £30,000 in order to be heard in high court the next day. And we raised £37,000 in 45 minutes. So then that night was a very long night of giving our testimonies. I was one of the lead claimants. And the reason I was a claimant is because I wasn't affiliated with Labour and I was in Camden rather than in Clapham, so having different routes to why women wanted to do this made it a nonpartisan issue. On that Thursday night, Harriet Harman wrote a letter to Cressida Dick saying not only did we have a reasonable excuse, but she would be attending. And at this point, somebody in the Met should have just been like, this isn't a good look. Like, we just need to back off, let them go ahead. But no, they dug their heels in. They're still digging their heels in. But it was the craziest night. Like, on the phone, I've had Anna Swarberry, who I didn't even know who that was. I had all these people, and we had all these politicians being like, Boris is going to step in and say, you can go ahead, this is all going to happen. And it just didn't. And they just kept going and going and going. And basically, the police were telling us that their hands were tied and there was nothing they could do, that the law didn't give them any option to give us a route to go ahead, when in actuality, they were having a ban on protest. And there were 4 of us. So there were 3, one was the head of Young Labor, 2 were counselors, and me. And if they weren't going to let us protest, who were they going to let protest? We had proactively gone to the police. We had our stewards had vests that had a track and trace code on. I had 1,000 electric tea lights in my living room because you're not allowed to have open flame on Clapham Common. So there's health and safety, and then there's health and safety. We also had rape counselors that would be standing by due to the traumatic nature of what we expected to come out in the news later. We had people that were just going to walk groups of women back to the tube and back to bus stations. Health and safety was paramount to what we were doing. What we want, and we were doing it earlier enough in the evening because it was still March. There weren't extra toilets being put in place. Like, I have an elderly dog that I have in a buggy. I was bringing her, friends were bringing their babies. It was gonna be distanced. It was like all of the infrastructure was there. But that Friday morning, the court could have either said, yes, we'll hear you, you can go ahead, B, you can't go ahead, or C, we're not gonna hear it. But we had to have everything still in place to make it go ahead in case. So massive, massive scramble. We had 55 stewards, we were doing the training. During this process, there were 31 satellite places that said they were gonna do vigils. So I, in trying to be responsible, had sent out a Google Doc publicly to each of those people saying, fill this out with your information, so once we have the verdict, we can disseminate it. In doing that, I made myself the official ringleader of all of it, and therefore responsible for 31 other locations, which my father still doesn't let me live down. The police threatened us with 10,000 pounds in fines each, and at one point it was said that I would be responsible for 320,000 pounds as an organizer for each of the 32 vigils, which our lawyers were arguing obviously wasn't going to be the case, but that was the big crux of the fight. We found out that they were going to hear us in high court. I got in trouble because I was like taking a picture on Microsoft Teams, which apparently you're not supposed to do. But as a girl from Philadelphia, I never expected to end up 3 days later in high court. It's like calling my dad, being like, "Hey, I'm getting arrested tomorrow. How you doing?" But they kept threatening us with 10,000 pounds and prosecution under the Serious Crimes Act, and that we didn't even know what that meant. Like, they weren't necessarily saying custodial sentences, but we were definitely getting arrested. And we were going back and forth and back and forth. And the judge, when we actually got into court, the judge said, there's no reason it should have gotten this far. The police have to give you the parameters within which you should go ahead, and you have to follow them. And the judge was really plain speaking, and it all seemed reasonable to us. The police asked us to pay their cost, and the judge said, absolutely not. It's your fault that they're here. We then left and immediately met with Scotland Yard. And while we were at the table negotiating, and we were like, we could do moving memorial lines, we could do 12 to 4 and 4 to 8. We could do, if you're only gonna let us do 30 people, you have to, in writing, tell us 30 people. They said they'd look the other way until 7 p.m., and then they'd start arresting people. And we're like, you're not gonna put it in writing. That doesn't help us. That doesn't help anybody in any of the other places. And they refused, and while we were negotiating, they sent out a press release that it would be illegal. Like, while we were in the same meeting as them. Like, the lack of respect and calling us naive young women just didn't stop. So there was a lot of anger and a lot of tears. And that night, Henna, who's the head of Young Labor, is actually the best facilitator of any meeting I've ever witnessed. What I thought was going to be 12 angry men in the meeting was actually one of the more profound meetings I've ever been in my life. She had each of us have 5 minutes, and we had to say why we had gotten involved, what our fears were, and what we wanted to do, and if we were willing to get arrested. And we decided that we were doing all or nothing. Like, we were all getting arrested, or none of us were getting arrested. We weren't going to split it up. And like, some women were crying about parliamentary passes. Some people were worried about their citizenship, where at the time we were like, they would never take away your citizenship. No, not so much. But as we went around the room, I was joking and calling us the Clapham Nine. But what actually came out of that meeting was, because we had raised 37 grand in 45 minutes and had the publicity behind us, we knew we could raise 90,000 pounds for the 9 of us. It wasn't going to be a problem. But for the 31 other women up and down the country, they weren't at that table. And if they lost their custody of their kids, if they went bankrupt, if they lost their jobs, and obviously they would be making the decision whether or not to hold the vigil, but not having a say at the table didn't feel like something we could do. And with my background and my marketing hat on, pivoting to fundraising and using the hook of 320,000 pounds for violence against women and girls groups felt a lot stronger. The vigil was going ahead. There was no way people were not showing up. But us showing up, did it really matter at that point? The police refused to give us a yes or a no if we would still be held responsible for the vigils, even if we did the cancellation tour. But we decided to cancel, and we decided that myself and Anna Burley, who's one of my co-founders, would do the entire press tour. So we started a Just Giving campaign the next morning and pivoted to fundraising, and we raised 550,000 pounds for violence against women and girls groups. I think I did 45 interviews that Saturday of telling people it was canceled and stay at home, but we obviously knew that they were going ahead. We had to be seen on camera to lessen our liability. So I did the Feminists of London vigil, but then I was on B-roll. I was watching live on the BBC as police invaded the bandstand and kneeled on women. And watching that on live TV and knowing that I told women to go to that, even that I took it back later, still haunts me. And I still somewhat regret we didn't go. I would probably do the same thing given that I'm an events organizer and my dealings with the police and dealings with the councils make up my livelihood. But it was crazy circumstances. But what then happened afterwards, in terms of the next day we met with Cressida Dick, and I point blank asked her what she would do differently knowing what she knew now. And she said absolutely nothing. No lessons learned, no apologies, no regrets. And they continue. You know, we've spent a year raising money to fight them in court to, like, I never really cared about my right to protest until they took it away from me. And then I spent 6 months raising money to fight them and to be vindicated on 6 different counts. They claim that we didn't understand the difference between unlawful and illegal. And they said that their threats of prosecution and their threats of the fine had no chilling effect on our decision to cancel, that we didn't cancel because of those threats, which luckily the judges agreed with us is ridiculous. But so much of the rest of the year and the rest of the campaign, had they let us go ahead and just do the vigil to begin with, I would have gone back to my life on Sunday. Like, there would have been 4 camera crews, it would have been sad, and then we would have gone back to our life and our business. But because of what they did, and I'm from Philadelphia, trying to silence a girl from Philly is never, ever gonna be a good idea. But they got us out fighting, and one of my best friends was back from Dubai last week, and she was like, how did you become like the person on TV about police reform? And I was like, it's been a year. But I know people use the word radicalized in different ways, but like, it radicalized me. I never thought about the police. Why would I? I'm an expat. I'm a white expat in Camden. My only dealings with the police are if my phone gets nicked. Like, but learning all of this, learning about the abuses of power, learning about policing by consent, learning about communities that are not policed by consent, watching what happened to Mina Smallman and learning about Biba and Nicole. We put on a vigil for Biba and Nicole because that had gotten like no press a year ago. And we put on, and we helped with a vigil for Sabina Nessa. And then one of the women, Ludo, in our group was like, I'm really sick of buying flowers for women that will never receive them. I'm done with vigils. I'm done because it gives the media and it gives the politicians a reason to go there and put up signs and say we're doing something, and then as soon as the cameras are off, the attention's off. What we have changed this year is the conversations that used to happen drunkenly at 2 in the morning just between women feel like they're happening at dining room tables. And we're talking, and the shame of our assaults, the shame of our harassment is much more being talked about. We're doing consent workshops with 10 and 11-year-old boys. We're talking to young women about ongoing consent. And really keeping the fire. We got rid of Cressida Dick, you know. I will take some glory and do a glory lap on that one. But it was a crazy experience and a crazy and sometimes really painful year of the responsibility from women and the responsibility from the communities. But it really also taught me that standing up and being counted and using event skills, using my applicable skills with the media and turning it from something like, I invented National Burger Day and I ran London Seafood Festival. Like, this was not my world. This was not at all what I did. But then by putting the skills I already had into motion and putting it into usage has changed my world and helped a lot of young women. And that's where I feel like the pandemic has made our communities a lot tighter and a lot smaller, and we have so much we can do in our backyards. Like, if you want to clean up a beach and I'm giving you 3 hours of my time, you can have me clean up a beach for 3 hours, or you can have me use my networks and organize 1,000 people to clean up a beach. And that's where you meet people that really want to do something but don't know where to start. And like domestic violence shelters have women there that if they were to be able to learn to code, or if they were able to learn to do something that they could then use as a career, or they were able to learn to teach, like if you have expert skills and efficiencies and project management. Charities are so bad at managing their time and money. And it's not that they're not trying, it's that they don't have those skills. But if you have those skills in your career and you can donate some of those best practices, Rosa, which is where we donated the money, is a grant-making foundation who's giving the money to women-run organizations, grassroots women-run organizations. And like Rosa has no clue about pay-per-click or about anything about online fundraising. But I've been asked for a digital marketing company to do some work for them. And I'm like, all right, let's pro bono this. You do a packet for all the charities that work with Rosa to teach them how to best maximize their presence online, and I'll do a few days for you. And things like that, where we sometimes discount what our day jobs are when we get into our communities and our lives, instead of really looking at what are the parts of your day job that can really benefit those communities, and what are the parts of your day job that you could offer out. One of the things that really struck me and why we went with Rosa is they were talking about that a cooking class in Hoxton got more cases of domestic violence reported than any other project that they had ever done, because that's where women felt safe. And it was a Wednesday night thing. Their husbands weren't suspicious. It was only women there. And that's when they felt, and so it doesn't always have to be what it says on the tin. And sometimes we were like, okay, and I know with job applications, we're like, if I don't have these 7 qualifications, am I enough to give my time? Am I good enough at this? Do I know how to do this? Whereas if you shift them around a little bit and add some shine to it, it's an open door. And a lot of people are like, oh, but I'm never gonna go on TV and do, I never expected to be on TV. I never expected this to become my life. Like, I met Anna babysitting her dog. Like, that's how we came together. But it's the people that you interact with, and each of us have skills that could really help our communities. We just don't always know how to tap into that or how to find where that could go. Engineering stuff, especially, a friend of mine was talking about accessibility the other day, and you get to things that they say are accessible, and then the elevator's broken 4 times a year, you know? And it's how do we use the skills that we have? How do we use carpentry skills to make something actually accessible? And so this is where we can shape and turn all of our skills into something, and a lot of times we don't ask our communities what they need. And actually walking in and saying, how could I be, if I'm just a person, I can just do this, but what else do you need? Where are your pain points? And actually sharing those pain points and talking about what other ways. And a lot of us, especially in this type of community, are major networkers anyway. I saw everybody in the coffee, catching up with everybody. It's like, use those networking skills to find out who needs help and who needs feeding and who needs what, as we all adjust and get through this. And that's where I feel like my community has dramatically changed in the last year. I wasn't politically active here, especially because, like, if it's not your country, it's really hard to understand the inner mechanisms and how it all works. Oh my God, High Court is nuts. Like, I still don't understand. The police appealed the denial of the decision to appeal. Like, and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. I just sat in High Court for a bunch of days and had binders in front of me. Nothing like Judge Judy. Absolutely nothing. I no longer want to be a barrister. But learned a ton from those people. And like my barrister, Pippa, who I adore, she had her baby during our case, which is just crazy. Like, Rory was like at High Court when they announced it, which was very fun. But like, she was on with us at 5 a.m. when we're making the decisions and doing the press. And she's like, I'm like, okay, what am I allowed to say? She's like, oh, I'm going to regret this, but you're off the lead. But as soon as I knew, I was allowed to say what had really happened. And our story hasn't changed the whole time, but being able to go out punching, that's where they can use me. And that's where calling the police to account and bringing attention to everything they did and how much they belittled us. But if they weren't gonna let us protest, are they gonna let Black Lives Matter people protest? Absolutely not. And because we didn't go ahead, because we stayed back that night, it became the purest case where they weren't saying they're just trying to get out of a fine, they're just trying to get out of a jail sentence. So although I regret not being there to support the women that were there, playing the long game for the first time in my life really paid off, and we fought the power and won, which is, it's quite my new party trick to walk in and be like, I fought the vet and won. They're still trying to appeal because they love wasting public money, but do you guys have questions? Oh.
Then, do we have mics for questions? There we go.
I could probably hear you, but I guess for the online, yes.
So whilst everyone's thinking up questions, they'll sort of the tech.
But yeah, quite the year.
Is it on? Yeah, there you go.
I was reluctant to ask the first question, but I will. Because I'm a man. And But I was just interested that, of course, you have had some credit for removing the first woman Metropolitan Police Commissioner, and I just wonder how that felt. That in a way she was a hero and a competent police officer until she got involved with you, and just how that felt, really.
So I was less concerned with the fact that she was a woman and more concerned with the fact that she continually denied the institutional racism, sexism, and homophobia within the force. And we did not call for her head until that meeting with her. We waited till we met with her. But she continually denied that there were any institutional problems. And at a Center for, or the Women's Institute thing, she said he was just a wrong'un. And they called him, I'm sorry, but they called him the rapist. I know it's like 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, but like they knew. He had prostitutes walk into his police station and walk him to an ATM. He brought prostitutes. People knew. He had been flashing. And like part of what I was so angry with, and the part of the whole last year that was probably the hardest for me was the day of the sentencing for him. Because my Philly bravado and how I grew up and the distrust of police in Philadelphia meant I had felt like there was a buffer between me and the case a little bit, and I was like, oh, I never would have gotten in the car. And then when we heard the handcuffing detail, that obviously disappeared. And any bravado and any idea of that, and the people that saw her being handcuffed, I know that they're still distraught. But if you or I knew that for 6 months that detail was coming out to the public, and you had 6 months to deal with that, 5 months before I would have put in 3 things in place that were actually going to keep women safer. And then 6 months go by, when that detail comes out, I would have pointed back to these 3 things that I've already put in place. I'm not telling women to run for buses. I'm not telling women to evade arrest and talking about fake police and FaceTiming fake police. He was a real police officer. He was a real police officer who used his warrant card and his handcuffs. What I would have put in place is stopping flashers, looking at people that have been flashing people, taking women seriously and believing women when they come to report cases. And none of that happened. My life is so dramatically different than it used to be. On the Tuesday before Crested Dick went, I was watching her in assemblies. I didn't even know you could do that. But I was watching her at London's assemblies about the Stephen Port inquiry when she was saying there's no homophobia in the force, that there might be a person or two that might tell a gay joke, but there's no homophobia in the force. Again, the force does mirror society, and you can't pretend that it doesn't. And by not acknowledging it, you're not looking for progress, you're not looking to make these things better. And it's a huge job. I'm not minimizing her job, I'm not minimizing her service. But if you deny and your whole goal in life is just to cover their bums, I'm trying not to curse. If you're just trying to do damage control rather than get reform. And reform has to come. So I don't really care who they get in as long as it's someone who is progressive, who wants to look at reform and really wants to tackle racism, sexism, and homophobia. Because without that, and it's hard work, it's hard to look at our own prejudices. It's hard to look at ourselves and say, I'm not very good at this. I'm not up on this. And for me, part of what was really painful about this whole process is I would say my weakest area of my politics was about trans men and women and not being informed enough and not feeling like I knew enough. But after the money we raised was inclusive, we were very, very much attacked and accused of stealing the money. And some TERF groups online came for us individually. I tweeted when we donated the money on my own private account, and I had a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne because I had quit drinking. I was like that my dead mom would be really proud and that I would never have had the stamina or capacity to have done the work if I was still drinking. And they wrote that I was a fame whore who was making my name on Sarah's neck. Like it was, and I'm a biological woman, and it was the nastiest, most feeling, like I thought people were gonna throw eggs at me. Like I was so scared to go out of my house because of hundreds of messages like that. And I raised £500,000 for women. Like I hadn't done anything nasty or mean. It's really hard to frame what I had done as cruel. But like that experience, and if your hobby is to hate one small group that's already going through hell, get a better hobby, you know? But it was things like that, whereas if we're not speaking up for the people that are being hurt the most, then who are we speaking up for? And Crested Dick, like, in a room with me telling me she would have done nothing differently, get her out. She's not fit for that. She's not fit for that role. And I don't have any qualms that she was a woman. I had a qualm that she did not do her job. And then the people that were the most awful to us in the force throughout this entire thing have been women. She went to the Home Affairs Committee and called us naive young women that meant well. Well, this naive young woman made you lose your job. Yeah, the filly comes out fighting.
I think a lot of this comes down to, I was mainly a teacher, I'm a music therapist now, but now they're very, very tight on who they take into teacher training colleges, and there's much more profiling of people that want to do it, as I'm sure there are into rabbinic schools. And I think the police are really behind with that.
But they're behind on everything.
There's this whole thing of people that want to be police are people that want to have power. And they're often people that are fairly inadequate themselves. Sorry, I'm really generalising here. But, it can be seen. I've heard people say, oh, my son wants to be a policeman. I hope it'll sort him out. Being a policeman will sort him out. You need to be the most empathetic, inclusive, understanding individual to become a policeman. And yet, their polls, I can only talk for the teaching profession, have really upped their game, because there have obviously been incidents in teaching, like there have been in the police, but they've really upped their game about selection at the first point of entry. And I don't think the police are even thinking about that.
They're starting to. They weren't even checking people's social media.
Yeah.
They were really bad.
It's becoming a graduate entry profession. For a long time, it was two-tier, wasn't it? Anyway,
But it's also making it more dangerous for good police. If none of us trust them, it makes it more dangerous. And this is the thing, and they're talking, David Carrick, who's the other one that was in Wayne Couzens' group, has now been accused by 14 women. He's got 34 counts of rape that he's been charged with. And that's your elite unit? Come on now. If you're not able to get predators in your backyard.
politicians with the police are exactly the same as happening in the Tory party.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no point of entry there either. It's these professions that point to be a politician profession. But
People keep asking me if I'm going to run. I'd be like, I make the worst politician.
Are there any other questions? Yes, I think.
Hi, well done, really, on what you've done with the police. My name's Esther Duggan. My brother was Jeremiah Duggan, who was killed in unknown circumstances, and we've actually tried, my family, to take on the police for a good many years, and we haven't really got anywhere. So it's quite overwhelming to try. Obviously, I also work as a social worker, so I see police, I work with them. Generally, I know that they are, like me, trying to do a good job. But it's very hard when you know that they've probably messed up on an investigation and they're covering themselves. And you're probably a victim where you're trying to prove that they actually didn't do the right investigation. So I don't know how people, really there is a way of getting everybody, because there's a lot of individual cases of victims, but they're not really working together. And then they get quite competitive with each other, I think, as well.
Yeah, and the expense. I'm very sorry for your family's loss, and the expense of it is huge. And that's the thing, is there was something that was saying that the government was trying to make judicial reviews harder because too many people do them. It was so hard, especially once our case was academic and the vigil was over, to raise the money to get it to still go back to court. I was begging people, but part of it was because DAC Twist had written a risk assessment about the vigil, and the number one risk was not women getting COVID. It was about reputational damage to the police. And because that was in writing, I was like, I'll sell a kidney. I don't care what I have to do to get that into the public eye and get that on the front pages of papers, because it had nothing to do with us. It just had to do with shutting us up, and because a police officer had killed her. It had nothing to do with keeping women safe from COVID. It had absolutely nothing to do with that. And also, they gave themselves such a bigger black eye by doing it, rather than just letting us get on with it. But yeah, getting the funding and getting the lawyers, we had to raise 87 grand before we could get our cost cap to come into play. And that's a lot of money. We were 4 women that are not in the public eye. It was just us trying to do the right thing. It was very much David and Goliath.
You. You mentioned about going into schools and talking to boys, which I think is desperately important. But obviously teachers are thoroughly overworked, and have you any solutions to how this could be done?
So we had partnered with Shout Out UK because they've got the teaching credentials, not us, about consent workshops within the RSE curriculum. And they say that like 10 and 11 is kind of when the othering process happens, so that's the best part. But part of the thing that I've learned through some of those workshops and talking to some teachers and boys is so much of the work that's been done before is kind of like, you can do this, you can't do this, rather than teaching both boys and girls about what ongoing consent looks like. And especially with some students that I know on the spectrum, it's so difficult that we're just saying, like, you can touch a girl's hand here, but you can't touch it, like, and not talking about that each person has different boundaries and each person has different levels of consent, and that the check-in process. And I think with girls as well, we've really, really lost the plot in terms of, did I enjoy that, rather than were my boundaries crossed? And then it fast forwards to over here, is this prosecutable by law? Will a court believe me? And we're not doing anything on the in-between on, did I like that? Do I want to see that person again? Am I happy with how that encounter went? And so we're losing so much of the nuance and the confidence and the happiness around sex and the happiness around that growth, that we're doing a disservice to all kids, where it becomes this cloudy thing where nobody knows what they're allowed to do or not allowed to do. And then they read the papers that are all just like shouty nonsense of, this will be banned, you're not allowed to call somebody pretty. And we've really lost the nuance of what consent looks like. So what we're trying to do with those workshops is have really rich discussions and options on how you say no and how you're confident saying no. I also very much, with young women that we've talked to, I really worry about them losing all sense of self as soon as there's pictures of themselves out there. And so many of them, you lose your voice at that point and you don't get it back. When I was little, it would be rumors, it wouldn't be any proof of anything. And keeping that and keeping the dignity that allows you to stand up and talk and keep confidence, I think, is also really important.
Hi. Do you think the police have people like you working for them?
No, absolutely not. I met with Maggie Blythe, is the head of the task force, Violence Against Women and Girls, which I'm actually now, after approaching her on Twitter and being like, are you ever going to meet with me? I did meet with her. And I'm now one of the stakeholders in their monthly meetings. But they were like, we're going to hire a comms person for a year. And I was like, do you really think hiring a comms person for 1 year is what's going to fix this problem? Also, who the hell wants that poison chalice? What, they know you're only there for a year, you come in and like throw some things and then you're gone? Nobody needs to listen to you. Nobody needs to actually take what you're saying to heart. So yeah, I'm definitely not going for that job. But no, they don't have anyone. And I don't think they have anyone that's seriously has any power talking about what the lack of confidence looks like, or they wouldn't keep appealing the appeals to the appeal, and it's just public money. And that's the thing, is our case is going to cost the public over £1 million. Mm-hmm. I don't want my money going towards it. So the night of the Child Q protest, I was at Stoke Newington's, and I'm like the worst activist in the world. I hate crowds and I hate protests. Like the drums and, I get really antsy in crowds, like events manager that hates crowds, great. But we were finding out at 4 o'clock whether or not they were appealing the verdict, and that protest was starting at 4 o'clock, and they put it through at 3:56. And again, I was crying, and I was like, this shouldn't be pulling focus about us, so I walked away for a while. But it's just this not learning anything from the decision, not taking any lessons. And it continues. And then they got told that it was hopeless. If you or I were doing a high court thing and was told that our appeal was hopeless, we wouldn't appeal that decision. And they're appealing that decision. Like they appealed War Boys 4 times. Again, these are things I had no idea about. I was like, my little blinders were on. Jacomi from Sister Space was like, why did it take a white woman getting killed for you to realize? And she's absolutely right. I was absolutely blissfully unaware. And being awake's a lot more painful, and it's been a really difficult year, and in a million ways it's super fulfilling, and in a million ways I no longer have the bravado. I'm a lot more nervous. I have lots and lots of counseling. because women trust me with their rape stories, and they trust me with all these things that I haven't been prepared for. And you want to signpost and make sure people are safe and make sure they have people that are supporting them. But we can't jump into everything, and it's balancing what we can do and how we can help and how we can't. But yeah, the police do not have a me. They definitely do not have a me. Or we'd be arm wrestling.
Thank God they don't have you.
Thank you so much. I've been following the story for the whole year, and it's just amazing. I really struggle with doing activism and then having absolute burnout and not being able to read the news and not being able to carry on doing what I'm doing because it's just too much. What have you been doing to look after yourself? How have you been coping with it?
So it does take some doing. There's a woman, Sarah Manning, who does book reviews, who sends me a list every month of stuff that I can watch that has like the sexual tension of Anne of Green Gables. Like it's like she sends me stuff that has no high drama at all. And CBT works for my brain really well. And I had a counselor from the Women and Girls group in Camden who made me use my Garmin watch to find out when my heart rate was the lowest. And it was watching baseball and going to the Asian supermarket in Camden, because nobody's ever in there. I don't know what anything is, and it's like really cool, and I could just sit there. And it's one of the places that like, but actually just knowing somewhere that really lowers my heart rate is really good. But it's very difficult for me to walk around now and not be on high alert all the time. And I do have to remember that in Philadelphia, they had 500 gun homicides last year. And if I was in Philly, I'd be much less safe than I am here. And I have to reality check myself. The women that this has happened to, it's absolutely horrendous. But it's really just, it is bad luck. You know, like it's bad numbers. And we are pretty safe. But my anger levels are through the roof. You know, and figuring out how to do that and not get burnt out and turn off has been quite difficult. And a lot of the things I used to do, just read stuff all the time or just read books all the time, that tapers in and out. When we first started doing the work, we were getting called for comment on every rape up and down the country, and I was like, I can't live like this, just getting called for comment for this. Our mission statement became, we will use education, legislation, and community action to ensure that no woman needs to text me when you get home again. So we very much are about women in public spaces. But then the week after we announced our mission statement, Julia James, the PCOS that was killed in Kent, and Maria Jane Rawlings was killed in Hertfordshire, and by 19 and 20-year-old men that they had never met. And like Julia James, I'm in touch with one of her cousins, like, was walking her dog, you know, and like the idea that a 19-year-old would walk up to you in Kent and just kill you while you're walking your dog, like what has happened with mental health services, what has happened with domestic violence like services that we've taken away, because all of this starts with domestic violence. All violence basically starts in the home. And we've taken away the services in the community and the way that that gets dealt with, that we've got these 19 and 20-year-olds walking around that are untethered. I did a speech for a corporate one that I was sent, that I actually canceled it because I got sent the agenda and it said stopping the next Wayne Couzens with my name next to it, and I was like, no amount of my advocacy is going to stop the next Wayne Couzens, and that's crazy. And I am very realistic that hopefully I can move the conversation on with sessions like this and with talking to allies and talking to people. And the reason I do so much LBC is I'm good at talking to conservative men, and if I can move that barometer a little bit, I don't think I'm going to stop a homicidal police officer. But if we can open the conversations and if we can move that on and we can keep the conversations going and looking at what we can all do to help our communities, I think we've done a good deal.
Yeah, you weren't in the country at the time, and I dare say looking around, many of the people here won't remember the case of Susie Lamplugh.
I've read about it because of the work.
Yeah, I mean, that was 35 years ago. And her mother set up a trust to educate women to protect themselves when they were out and about. Now, I'm sure that wouldn't have worked with somebody like Couzens. That was clearly in a completely different class. But they did a lot of work. You're doing a great deal of work now. My question is, how do you ensure that you make real change for the future rather than winning something now. Because I think that the Susie Lamplugh Trust felt that they were making progress at the time, but here we are.
Absolutely, and I think the difference between us and with respect to what they've done is male violence against women isn't something I can solve. It's something that sits with men, and I don't accept that any change in my behavior. I don't accept that I could do all the Krav Maga in the world, and if somebody wants to kill me, that's it. So I don't accept that me changing my behavior, changing my roots, or changing what I wear is going to protect me. I got asked recently, a council is giving people rape alarms out, and a council is paying for rape alarms, which blows my mind that that's what they're spending their money on. Women aren't getting saved by rape alarms. And that's the thing. When it's down to me to keep myself safe, that's what I reject. I don't know how much change, because sometimes it does feel like it's a drop in the ocean. But we talk about harassment on streets, and 97% of women are harassed on streets. And it's not once, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And in my ideal world, if two boys are in a car with another boy and a guy yells something out a window, I want us to get to a point where those two men in that car with that other man ostracize him and are like, I'm not getting in a car with you again if you act like that, rather than it coming from me, rather than it coming from women. I want that behavior to be so abhorrent and so ostracized. And some of the stuff and some of the examples I use about male behavior is if I'm in a pub garden and a man approaches me and I can see my friends and I can see the bartender and asks me out, that's fine. I have the wherewithal to say yes or no, but if I'm coming out of a basement bar in Soho and I'm coming out of the loo and he's on the stairs and it's the same guy saying the same thing, it's a completely different situation because he's my exit route. And men understanding what that power dynamic is and them thinking it, because we always have to think it, and getting through to them that they need to take the extra steps to put themselves in my shoes and to understand the reason I'm cagey when I'm walking around is all of the buildup of harassment that I've experienced in my life. So trying to get through to men and men taking responsibility for the behavior and men dialing it down rather than it being up to me. Because if I could solve it, believe me, it would be solved by now. Like if me standing on soapboxes would make any way of stopping it, it'd be over. But it's just not something in my power to actually fix. It's something that men have to do. And it's something that men know. Men know the creeps in their office. Men know the aggressors in their offices. Men know the aggressors in their communities. And men have a lot more power to do something about it than I do.
So I would like to ask, you say you're an accidental activist because you kind of fell in it, but accidental almost sounds like you've not worked, and you've worked incredibly, incredibly hard, and you were aware of your networks. And my question is, where we're looking at this track of social action, I guess, how do we do it? What were your steps to know that you could build this network? Not just when it was loud in the media, but you continued being able to do that work.
So the rules I've got of engagement are I say yes and go in person as much as possible for all students. Any students that approach us, yes, absolutely. Absolutely no to all GB news, and everything in between is down to availability. I choose for the protection of self to not be a punching bag. If somebody wants to spar, I'm up for it, I enjoy it. But I'm not gonna go somewhere intentionally if they're gonna try to ridicule or lampoon me. Not gonna happen. Likewise, I got asked to be on GB News, on GMB 2 weeks ago about the staring on the tube thing. And I'm not wasting my breath. Not when the police aren't catching actual rapists and they're gonna talk about prosecuting staring. It's never gonna happen. It's just something stupid. I'm not gonna go on TV and give that oxygen. So again, we say yes to tons. I've done 400 appearances this year in terms of media appearances, but I also do at least once a month, I meet with a female student face to face because I need personally to know that I am helping somebody. I need personally to know that I'm bigging someone up. The other thing I've really been training the younger women that I meet that are journalism students is to learn how to go on the radio, learn how to be in front of the camera, to tell their own stories, because nobody's gonna promote them as much as they're gonna need to promote themselves. They need to be ready to go on Woman's Hour all the time. And teaching them that, I did a couple of lectures at Leeds University, teaching students, because they're gonna carry the flags much longer than me, and that's the one-on-one stuff is stuff that gets me going for another month. Because if I can help some girls and feel like I'm actually, like I have a Ukrainian student who, oh my God, she interviewed me for like an hour and I was like, oh, so tell me your story. And she's like, it's been a bad weekend, war started. And I was like, what? Why are you interviewing me? And then I put her on Woman's Hour and I had her on Times Radio and I meet with her every week and just try to support her. And like, but again, that's the human stuff that I need. I take your dog and make out with your dog a lot. That helps me with my mood and my burnout. Just, I keep joking that I'm gonna go somewhere and surround myself with Cavalier puppies and then I'll be fine. But yeah, really looking at that and people don't wanna ask for help, but you can help each other. And that's the thing is once you have that and once you have outlets or you're like students, like I really, really have tapped into London School of Economics and UCH and like just getting to students and doing a lot of radio with them. And like, they're just so happy when you come and they like tell you they're like, they idolize you and you get a little ego boost and you feel good for a couple days. And then you get yelled at on Twitter, get told, go back to America. I was like, they're even worse to women there. Go figure.
So kind of building those one-on-one relationships and tapping into the networks. And
answering, like when you hear the call, not being too busy for it, even though we're all too busy for everything. Just, I don't know. Another part of my life, I've had a pretty big transformation with the not drinking, and I lost a lot of weight. And like when women email me about that, it's a really hard email to write. So when you answer it, they're really grateful. And it's like, we're all too busy, but like when people are personally reaching out to you or have real questions, like, and I'll entertain questions about Reclaim, about rape alarms, about different things, but I do get off on the fight. So like when they come up with the 888 crap because 999 doesn't work, I'm more than happy to go out swinging. And I actually get more energy from fighting people on Ian Dale's show and stuff like that.
That's great. Yeah, go for it.
I like weird questions.
What can we do as women about other women who are bringing women down? Like you're talking about female journalism students, and I'm sort of friends with someone who's recently published private information about two of my other friends in the Jewish news, as some of us might have seen, and actually like what can we be doing to make sure that women aren't just
not awful to each other. No, it's really hard. My best friend's a producer for Guilty Feminist, and so she's lived 10 years of this before me. So I'm the baby in it, and she talks about friendly fire, and that friendly fire is what's going to take us all down because it's so much more painful, and it's so much more painful when it's coming from other women. The Monday after everything happened with the vigil, Boris announced that misogyny would be made a hate crime, and I tweeted, "Oh my God, we made this happen," and somebody from a political staff was like, "Who's we? You've been doing this for 3 minutes. Who are you for taking claim for?" It's not pie. Like, if it benefits all of us, it's not pie. It's not like I eat it and you don't get it. But I erased it. And again, it's deciding which fights to fight. But I call Cressida Dick to account. I do not take that just because you identify as female, I've got the sisterhood. That's not how I play. If you demonstrate the values, if you stand up, absolutely. But if you're coming, Priti Patel? No, absolutely not. And I'm not, no, just not doing it. And I'm not gonna, and Cressida Dick, you know what? You checked a box, but you didn't do anything for those boxes. You didn't do anything for the people that occupy those boxes. No, I'm not having it. And I'm not just elect a woman because she's a woman, because I've seen the women that get elected, and I'm not here for it. But I also am happy to come out against them. And people say that I'm not progressive enough in that way, but I don't think just because you're a woman you get a free pass.
Amazing. I want to say a massive, massive thank you to you, Jamie. It's inspirational. I hope that we can all take our anger at whatever it is that makes us angry, and maybe we'll all become accidental activists as well, tap into our networks, use each other and the people we know. And thank you so much for coming and telling us your story.
I hope you guys have a great day of celebration.
I believe that the next thing is coffee and teas and schmoozing, networking, and then there's a great program of things happening today.